The deafening roar of the imported motorcycle echoed along the dirt road that snaked along the coast, raising a cloud of orange dust that contrasted with the deep blue of the sea. Richard Montgomery, a 45-year-old businessman known for his impeccable posture and Italian suits, now found himself completely out of place in that rustic landscape, his white shirt stained with sweat and his expensive pants covered in red dust. The small town of Northern Shores, with its simple, colorful houses, that seemed to sprout between the palm trees, wasn't in his plans. In fact, nothing in his life followed a plan anymore since he had begun his obsessive search for clues about the whereabouts of his sister Maria, who had disappeared 25 years ago in that same region. The afternoon sun was punishing when his Ducati began to fail, first with small hiccups, then with a more serious cough, until finally stopping completely at the entrance to the town. Richard ran his hand through his graying hair, trying to maintain his composure while watching smoke escape from the overheated engine. "You're going to need Little Flower," said a woman who was sweeping the sidewalk in front of her small store, without even waiting for him to ask for help. "She's the only one around here who understands these modern machines." "Little Flower?" Richard asked, arching an eyebrow skeptically. The woman simply pointed to an improvised workshop at the end of the street, where a faded flag lazily fluttered in the sea breeze. As he approached the indicated place, Richard began to hear a childish voice singing an old song, the kind his mother used to sing. The sound came from under an old Jeep, where a pair of small legs and overalls dirty with grease moved with surprising agility. "Excuse me," he cleared his throat, feeling ridiculous for being about to ask for help from someone who, by the appearance of the legs, couldn't be more than 10 years old. A girl slid out from under the vehicle with the agility of a cat. Her large, expressive eyes shone with an intelligence that seemed out of place in someone so young. Her tanned face was stained with grease, but her smile was radiant and confident. "Good afternoon, mister. I'm Little Flower, but you can call me Faye," she introduced herself, cleaning her hands on a rag that was already dirtier than clean. "I saw your bike coming, or rather, I heard it dying. Ducati automatic transmission, isn't it? They always have problems with this road dust." Richard couldn't hide his surprise. "How did you—" "The sound," she explained, already walking towards the motorcycle. "Each engine has its own voice, you know. You just need to know how to listen. This one is telling me it has sand in the transmission, and probably the air filter is completely clogged." As she spoke, Faye was already crouched beside the bike, her small, agile fingers moving with precision through the engine. Richard observed, divided between admiration and disbelief, when something caught his attention. On the girl's ring finger, a sapphire ring with a peculiar design glinted under the afternoon sun. Time seemed to freeze. That ring? It was impossible. He knew every detail of that jewel, every small scratch on its surface. It was the same ring that his sister Maria wore on the day she disappeared, a unique piece made especially for her with the Montgomery family crest. "That ring," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "Where did you get it?" Faye stopped her work for a moment, looking at the jewel as if seeing it for the first time. "Oh, this. It was my mom who gave it to me. I mean my adoptive mom. She said I was already wearing it when she found me." Richard's heart accelerated. After 25 years of fruitless searching, was it possible that fate had guided him here? That his motorcycle had broken down exactly in this town, leading him to this extraordinary girl who wore his sister's ring. "And your mother, is she nearby?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual while his mind raced with possibilities. "Mrs. Rose is at the laundry now," Faye replied, turning her attention back to the motorcycle. "She works there all day, but you don't need to worry about that now. Your bike will need a complete cleaning of the transmission. It will take a few hours, but I can make it as good as new." Richard observed as the girl worked, noticing details. Now that his initial shock had obscured, the way she furrowed her brow in concentration, exactly as Maria used to do. The slightly crooked smile when she was satisfied with something, another characteristic of his sister. The sound of tools mixed with the noise of waves in the background, creating a peculiar symphony that seemed to accompany Richard's thoughts. He had arrived there looking for clues about the past, but had found something much more intriguing, a present full of possibilities and mysteries. "I'll need some parts I don't have here," Faye announced after a thorough inspection. "You'll have to stay in town for a few days until I can fix your bike properly." Richard smiled, feeling that fate was offering him exactly what he needed. "That's not a problem," he replied, watching the sun beginning to set on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange that reflected on the sapphire of the ring. "I think I'm going to enjoy spending some time around here." The news of the elegant stranger's arrival spread through northern shores like wildfire through dry straw. In less than 24 hours, everyone already knew that he had checked into the only inn in town, and more importantly, that he had shown a peculiar interest in Little Flower and her ring. Rose Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she organized the last laundry deliveries of the day. The laundry where she worked was in the center of town, a simple building with peeling walls that, like her, carried the marks of time and hard work. Her thoughts were distant, reviewing for the 1,000th time the events of that stormy night, so many years ago. "Mrs. Rose," the voice of Mrs. Zelda, the town's official gossip, crossed the humid environment of the laundry. "Have you heard about the rich man who arrived? They say he couldn't take his eyes off your girl's ring." Rose felt her heart tighten. It had been years since she had thought of that jewel, trying to bury the memories along with so many other secrets. "It must be just curiosity," she replied, trying to appear disinterested. "Faye has this gift for attracting attention with her talent for machines." "But they say he's not a simple tourist," Mrs. Zelda continued, lowering her voice, as if sharing a state secret. "Josefa, who cleans the inn, told me she saw his name in the documents. He's a Montgomery, one of those Montgomerys from the famous jewelry stores." The iron rose was holding escaped from her hands, producing a dull thud as it hit the floor. Montgomery, that surname she had feared hearing again. Her hands trembled as she bent down to pick up the iron, her mind returning to that stormy night, to the desperate face of the young woman who had handed her a baby and a ring. "Are you okay?" Mrs. Zelda asked, genuinely concerned about Rose's sudden paleness. "Just tired," Rose forced a smile. "End of the day is always like this." Meanwhile, in the improvised workshop, Faye continued working on Richard's motorcycle, completely oblivious to the agitation that her interaction with the stranger had caused. Her small hands moved with precision among the engine parts, while her mind wandered between dreams and fragmented memories that she could never fully understand. Since she was little, she had these strange dreams. A large house by the sea, an elegant woman singing a lullaby, the sound of furious waves. She had never told anyone, not even her mother, fearing that these fragments of memory could somehow hurt the only family she knew. "Impressive," Richard's voice brought her back to reality. He was standing at the entrance to the workshop watching her work. "Where did you learn so much about engines?" Faye shrugged, continuing her work. "Nobody taught me. It's like the machines talk to me, you know. It's always been that way." Richard approached, noticing how she had methodically organized all the parts of the motorcycle. It was the same system his sister Maria used in her jewelry laboratory, a characteristic that always intrigued the family, considering that no one else had this disposition for methodical organization. "Your mother must be very proud of you," he commented, trying to probe for more information. "Mrs. Rose is the best mother in the world," Faye responded firmly, but then her voice softened. "Even though she's not my real mother, she has always taken care of me as if she were." "And you've never been curious about your biological parents?" The question made Faye pause for a moment, her hands suspended over the engine. "Sometimes," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper, "but I'm afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of hurting Mrs. Rose, of discovering something that might change everything." She went back to work, but her movements were slower, thoughtful. "And then there are the dreams." "Dreams?" Richard leaned in, interested. Faye bit her lip, regretting having mentioned something she had always kept to herself. "It's nothing," she said quickly, "just silly dreams." But Richard had already noticed how she unconsciously touched the ring while speaking, a gesture his sister Maria made constantly. Every small detail, every mannerism, Every coincidence seemed to scream that he was on the right track. On the beach, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange that reflected on the calm waters. Fishermen returned with their nets, their ancient songs mixing with the sound of the waves. It was the kind of late afternoon that made northern shores seem stopped in time, a place where secrets could remain, buried for decades. But some secrets, like the waves that constantly shaped the coast, had the power to transform everything in their path. And now, with Richard's arrival, the calm waters of northern shores were beginning to stir, threatening to bring to the surface truths long submerged. Rose observed this movement from afar, from the window of the laundry, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she could not protect Faye forever. The past, like the tide, was returning, and she would need to find a way to face it without losing the only thing that really mattered, her daughter's love. Dawn in northern shores brought with it the salty aroma of the sea, mixed with the smell of fresh bread from Mr. Jack's bakery. Richard was already up, observing the movement of the city awakening from his veranda at the inn. In just 3 days, he had already memorized the local routine. First came the fishermen, then the ladies on their way to church, and finally the children running to school. But that morning something was different. An unusual agitation was taking over the streets, with people gathering in small groups, talking in worried tones. It was when he saw Mrs. Zelda running towards the laundry, her flip-flops making a characteristic noise against the stones of the sidewalk. "Rose, Rose," she shouted, still at a distance. "Have you heard? Old Gregory is back." Richard noticed how several people stopped their activities upon hearing that name. There was something in the air, a palpable tension that seemed to make even the seagulls fly lower. Curious, he decided to go down and walk around the town, trying to understand what that name meant to the community. At Faye's workshop, the movement was different. The girl was busy with a new invention, a kind of automatic irrigation system made with parts from old bicycles and discarded pipes. Upon seeing Richard approaching, her face lit up. "Good morning, Mr. Richard. Look at what I'm making for the community garden," she exclaimed proudly. "With this, the plants will be watered by themselves, using the rainwater we store in the tanks." Richard smiled, impressed not only with the ingenuity of the project, but with how that child could transform junk into something useful for the whole community. It was exactly the kind of thing Maria would do. His sister always said that true luxury was being able to help others. "Faye," he began, carefully choosing his words, "do you know someone named Gregory?" The girl's smile instantly disappeared, replaced by a serious expression that seemed to age her childish face. "You've heard about him too?" "I heard his name this morning. It seems he has returned to town." Faye put down her tools and sat on an old wooden bench, her legs nervously swinging. "He shows up from time to time. Mom never lets me get near him, says he's a dangerous man. But, Richard encouraged, sitting beside her. "But sometimes when he's in town, I have more of those dreams. You know, the ones I told you about? And there's one more thing." She hesitated, looking around as if checking if they were really alone. "Once I saw him looking at my ring. He turned as white as the clouds in the sky, as if he had seen a ghost." Richard felt his heart race. Gregory. That name began to awaken old memories. There was a Gregory who worked for his family years ago as a private security guard. He disappeared around the same time as Maria, and the investigations never managed to establish a connection between the two events. His thoughts were interrupted by a shout coming from the laundry. "Faye, come home right now!" Rose's voice sounded authoritative and frightened. "But Mom, I haven't finished the irrigation system yet," Faye protested. "Now!" Rose's tone did not admit discussion. Faye looked at Richard with a mix of apology and frustration. "I have to go. Mom gets different when old Gregory is in town. More nervous, you know? As if she's afraid of something." As he watched the girl run towards the laundry, Richard noticed a solitary figure standing on the opposite corner. He was a tall man, with completely white hair and a military posture even after so many years. His eyes were fixed in the direction of Faye, and his expression was a mask of shock and recognition. Gregory had aged, but Richard recognized him instantly. The former security guard of the Montgomery family seemed to have seen better days. His clothes, although clean, were worn, and his hands trembled slightly as he held a dark wooden cane. The old man began to approach the laundry, but stopped abruptly when he saw Richard. His eyes widened in recognition, and for a moment it seemed like he was going to say something. But then, with surprising agility for his age, he turned and disappeared among the alleys of the town. Richard remained standing, observing the place where Gregory had vanished. The pieces of the puzzle began to move in his mind. The sapphire ring, Faye's dreams, Rose's fear, and now the return of the man who perhaps held all the answers. In the laundry, Rose was hurriedly closing all the windows, her hands trembling as they ran through the latches. Faye observed her with concern, never having seen her mother so agitated. "Mom," she called softly, "why are you so afraid of old Gregory?" Rose paused for a moment, her hands still on the last window. When she turned to her daughter, her eyes were watery. "There are things from the past that are better left quiet, my flower. Some truths are like the sea in a storm, they can swallow everything we love." That night, as the town slept, 3 people remained awake. Rose in her kitchen, reviewing old promises and secrets. Richard in his room at the inn, connecting dots of a story that was beginning to make sense. And somewhere among the shadows of Northern Shores, an old ex-security guard who carried the weight of a truth that could change everything. The following morning brought with it one of Northern Shore's traditional celebrations, the Lantern Festival. The streets came alive with colorful decorations, and the smell of typical delicacies filled the air. It was an ancient celebration, where residents lit paper lanterns and released them into the sea at sunset, each carrying a wish or a message for distant loved ones. Faye was especially excited, running from one side to the other, helping with the organization. Her skills with tools made her essential in setting up the booths and preparing the structures for the lanterns. Rose observed her from afar, her heart divided between pride and fear. Each year, her daughter looked more like that young woman from the stormy night. "She has the same way about her, doesn't she?" A hoarse voice emerged beside Rose, making her jump with fright. It was Gregory, looking even older in the daylight. "What do you want?" Rose whispered, nervously looking around. "We had an agreement." "Things have changed, Rose. He's here." Gregory indicated with a movement of his head Richard, who was talking with some fishermen near the dock. "And he won't give up until he discovers the truth." "What truth?" A third voice joined the conversation. It was Mrs. Zora, the town's matriarch, known for her wisdom and for guarding the ancient local traditions. "The truth that the sea guards, or the one you try to hide?" Rose and Gregory exchanged tense looks. Mrs. Zora always seemed to know more than she should, as if the waves themselves told her ancient secrets. "The sea returns what was entrusted to it," the old woman continued, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Isn't that what we always say around here? Perhaps it's time for the waters to return this truth too." While the adults talked in whispered tones, Faye worked on her own lantern. Unlike the traditional ones made only of paper, hers had small mechanisms that would make the colors change as it floated over the waves. Richard approached, admiring the artisanal work. "It's for my real mother," Faye revealed without raising her eyes from her work. "Every year I make a special lantern for her, even without knowing who she is. Silly, isn't it?" "It's not silly at all," Richard replied, sitting down beside her. "You know, I'm also going to release a lantern today for my sister Maria." Faye stopped her work, looking at him with curiosity. "What happened to her?" "She disappeared a long time ago, very close to here. She was an amazing person, you know. She had a special talent for creating things just like you, and she wore a ring very similar to yours." The girl instinctively touched the ring on her finger, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Sometimes I dream of a woman who wears a ring just like this. She's always singing a song about the sea and the stars." Richard felt his heart skip a beat. "Do you remember what the song is like?" Before Faye could answer, a noise of breaking glass caught everyone's attention. In the main booth, Rose had dropped a tray of glasses, her eyes fixed on something, or someone, in the middle of the crowd. Faye ran to help her mother, leaving Richard with more questions than answers. He observed as mother and daughter collected the glass shards, noticing how Rose seemed paler than normal, her movements tense and hurried. The festival continued, with more and more people arriving at the beach. The sun was beginning its descent on the horizon, painting the sky with intense colors that reflected on the calm waters. It was the moment everyone was waiting for, the lighting of the lanterns. One by one, the lights began to float over the sea, each carrying hopes, longings, and secrets. Faye's lantern, with its special mechanisms, shone uniquely among the others, its colors changing like a floating kaleidoscope. It was then that something extraordinary happened. While everyone observed the lanterns, Faye began to softly hum a melody. Richard froze upon recognizing the song. It was the same one Maria sang whenever she worked on her creations. Rose, who was nearby, also recognized the melody. Her legs weakened, and she needed to lean on one of the booths. Gregory, standing a few meters behind, let his cane fall on the sand, his face a mask of astonishment. "Where did you learn that song?" Richard asked, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't know," Faye replied, seeming confused. "It's always been in my head. In my dreams, the woman with the ring sings to me." The lanterns continued their gentle dance over the waves, but now a palpable tension had settled between that small group on the beach. Rose looked at Gregory with supplication in her eyes. The old security guard seemed to be fighting an internal battle, and Richard was sure he was closer than ever to discovering the truth about his sister. The night advanced, and with it, the secrets of northern shores seemed increasingly close to coming to the surface, like the lanterns themselves that floated over the dark sea, illuminating the path to truths long submerged. The week following the Lantern Festival brought a change in the climate of northern shores. Dark clouds accumulated on the horizon, heralding a storm that the most experienced fishermen said would be a big one. The sea, always so gentle in that region, was beginning to show its more temperamental face. In Faye's workshop, the routine continued, but with a significant difference. Now she had constant company. Richard had rented a small shed next door, where he had improvised an office. To everyone in town, he said he was working remotely on his business. In truth, every free minute was dedicated to observing Faye and trying to understand the mystery that surrounded her. "You're looking at my ring again," Faye commented without taking her eyes off the engine she was repairing. "Everyone's been looking at it lately. Even old Gregory keeps spying on me from a distance." Richard approached, holding a small blue velvet case in his hands. "Faye, can I show you something?" The girl cleaned her hands on her overalls and approached, curious. Richard opened the case, revealing a ring identical to hers but in adult size. "This ring belonged to my sister Maria. It's a family heirloom made especially for her." Faye took the ring carefully, her eyes wide with surprise. "It's just like mine. Look, it even has the same strange design here on the side." "It's not a strange design," Richard explained softly. "It's the Montgomery family crest. Each of these rings is unique, handmade, with a special numbering engraved inside." Faye immediately took her ring off her finger, looking for the numbering. Her eyes widened even more when she found it. "MM25, she read aloud. "Maria Montgomery, 25 years old," Richard translated, his voice choked. "That was her age when—" Noise of falling metal interrupted the conversation. Rose was standing at the entrance to the workshop, several tools scattered at her feet. Her face was as pale as wax. "Faye, go home now," she ordered, her voice trembling. "But Mom, I was just—" "Now!" Rose shouted, something she had never done before. Faye looked frightened from her mother to Richard, quickly returned the ring to the case, and ran home. Rose waited until she was out of sight before turning to Richard, her eyes flashing with anger and fear. "You have no right," she said through clenched teeth. "No right to come here and destroy everything I've built." "I just want to know the truth, Mrs. Rose," Richard replied, keeping his voice calm. "Mr. Gregory worked for my family for years. You know him, don't you? Do you know what happened to my sister?" Rose took a step back, as if Richard's words were physical blows. "Some truths are too dangerous, Mr. Richard. There are powerful people involved. People who wouldn't hesitate to hurt an innocent child." "What people?" Richard insisted, but was interrupted by a new voice. "The same ones who made your sister flee, Montgomery." Gregory was standing at the entrance to the workshop, leaning on his cane. He seemed to have aged 10 years since the festival. "Rose, We can't hide anymore. They already know the girl is here." "What are you talking about?" Richard demanded, his patience running out. "Who are they?" A distant thunder cut through the air, making Rose flinch. The dark clouds now covered the entire sky, and the first drops of rain were beginning to fall. "Your father," Gregory answered simply. "August, Montgomery and his partners, the men who transformed your family's jewelry empire into a facade for shady businesses. The same men your sister fled from when she discovered the truth." Richard felt the world spin around him. His father, the respected businessman August Montgomery. "That's impossible," he murmured. "Is it as impossible as a 10-year-old child having the same extraordinary talent as her aunt for mechanics?" Gregory asked. "As impossible as her knowing a lullaby that only Maria knew?" The rain was now falling hard, its noise on the zinc roof of the workshop creating an ominous soundtrack for that conversation. "Faye isn't your sister, Richard," Rose finally spoke, tears running down her face. "She's your niece." The thunder that cut through the sky at that moment seemed to underline that bombshell revelation. Richard staggered, needing to lean on a nearby workbench. "Maria was pregnant when she fled," Gregory continued. "She discovered incriminating documents in your father's office, evidence that the family jewels were being used for other purposes. When she confronted August, he what?" Richard could barely breathe. He told her she had to choose. Either she kept quiet and maintained her life of luxury, or she disappeared. Forever. Rose approached Richard, her eyes begging for understanding. "She arrived here on a stormy night like this one. She was desperate, had just given birth. She begged me to take care of the baby, said she would return when it was safe. She left only the ring so that one day the right family could find their daughter." Outside, the storm increased its fury, as if the sky itself was responding to the intensity of those revelations. And somewhere in that small coastal town, a 10-year-old girl was playing with her tools, completely unaware of the fact that her life was about to change forever. The storm that punished northern shores seemed to mirror the turbulence of emotions stirring in the hearts of its inhabitants. In Rose's small house, Faye was sitting by the window, watching the lightning tear through the sky while her skilled hands assembled and disassembled a small radio, a habit she had when she was nervous. In the workshop, the silence that followed, the revelations was broken only by the sound of rain and occasional thunder. Richard remained motionless, trying to process everything he had just discovered. His world, built on the immaculate reputation of the Montgomery family, was crumbling like a sandcastle before the tide. "I need proof," he finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "I can't simply believe that my father—" "The proof is right under your nose," Gregory interrupted, limping to a dusty shelf. "Look at her inventions, the gadgets she creates out of nothing. It's the same gift your sister had, the same sparkle in her eyes when she solves a mechanical problem." Rose approached an old toolbox and opened it with reverential care. "Maria left this with me before she left," she said, removing a leather-bound notebook. "She said one day it might be useful for her daughter to understand who she really is." Richard took the notebook with trembling hands. The pages were yellowed by time, but his sister's elegant handwriting remained as clear as crystal. They were projects, dozens of them, some for revolutionary jewelry, others for complex mechanisms she never had the chance to build. "That's how she discovered it," Gregory explained, pointing to a specific drawing. "Maria created a unique identification method for the family jewels, microscopic numbers, visible only under specific light. When she began to notice strange patterns, sequences that didn't make sense, she investigated," Richard completed, beginning to understand, "and discovered that the jewels were being used for—" A new thunder interrupted the conversation, so close that it made the windows tremble. At the same instant, the door of the workshop opened violently, and Faye came, running in, soaked by the rain. Mom, there's a strange car parked in front of our house," she shouted, breathless. "Men in suits are asking about me." Rose's face lost all its color. Gregory immediately positioned himself near the window, peering through the slats of the blinds. Black car, dark windows, he asked, his voice tense. Faye nodded, frightened. They said they're from the Montgomery family. Richard felt his blood freeze. My father, he whispered. He must have discovered. But how? The Lantern Festival. Rose groaned, realizing someone must have recognized the song Faye sang, Maria's song. We don't have much time, Gregory declared, his military posture returning instinctively. They won't simply go away, not after searching for so long. Faye looked from one adult to another, confused and frightened. What are you talking about? Why are these men looking for me? And why does Mr. Richard have the notebook of the woman from my dreams? The silence that followed her question was deafening. Rose knelt in front of her daughter, tears streaming down her face. My flower, there is so much we need to tell you, but now is not the time. We need to keep you safe. Safe from what? From whom? Faye insisted, her voice trembling. Richard approached, tucking Maria's notebook into his jacket. Faye, do you trust me? The girl hesitated for a moment, then nodded. There was something in his eyes, a familiarity that she had always felt but never understood. Then I need you to do exactly what we're going to ask you, he continued. Your mother, Rose, she has always taken care of you, always protected you, and now I'm going to protect you too, because you're much more special than you imagine. A new flash of lightning illuminated the workshop, revealing for a moment the silhouettes of 5 people united by a secret that, like the storm outside, threatened to destroy everything in its path. But also like the storm, perhaps it was necessary to clear the air and allow a new day to be born. In the street, the black car remained parked, its occupants waiting patiently. Inside the workshop, decisions needed to be made quickly. The past had finally caught up with the present, and the future of a small prodigy mechanic depended on the choices that would be made in the next few minutes. The rain continued to punish Northern Shores when Mrs. Zora appeared unexpectedly at the back door of the workshop, her wise eyes shining with unusual urgency. Come with me, she whispered. I know a safe path through the beach caves. There was no time for questions. The group followed the old woman through a labyrinth of narrow alleys, while the noise of doors being opened echoed down the main street. August Montgomery's men had begun their search. Faye firmly held Rose's hand, carrying only a small backpack with her most precious tools. With each thunder she shrank, not from fear of the storm, but of the shadows that seemed to pursue them. The caves of Northern Shores hold many secrets, Mrs. Zora explained, as she guided the group along a steep path by the sea. In ancient times, they were used by fishermen to escape storms, later by families who needed to hide. The sea has always protected its own. Richard observed with admiration how the old lady moved with agility among the slippery rocks, as if she knew every stone in the path. Gregory came last, his cane now serving more as a weapon than a support, his eyes attentive to any suspicious movement. They arrived at an almost invisible entrance among the rocks. Inside, the cave was surprisingly spacious, with several natural chambers connected by narrow passages. The sound of the sea echoed on the stone walls, creating a mysterious music that seemed to tell ancient stories. This is where your mother hid before you were born, Rose revealed softly to Faye, when everyone was already safe inside the cave. Maria spent 3 days in these caves, waiting for the right moment to leave. Faye released Rose's hand, her eyes wide with surprise and confusion. Maria, Mr. Richard's sister? She is my mother. Yes, my flower, Rose answered, tears running down her face. She entrusted you to me to keep you safe. She was very young, was scared, but her love for you was so great that she preferred to stay away to protect you. But protect me from what? Faye asked, her voice trembling. Richard approached, taking Maria's notebook from his jacket. From men who transformed our family's dream into something dark. Your grandfather, my father, used Montgomery jewels for purposes that your mother could not accept. When she discovered it and tried to report it, she was threatened. And old Gregory, what's his role in all this? The ex-security guard leaned against a rock, his tired face illuminated by the lantern that Mrs. Zora had lit. I helped your mother escape. I was the head of security for the Montgomery family, But when I discovered what was really happening behind the scenes, I couldn't stand by. Your grandfather never knew of my involvement, so I stayed around, watching over you from afar all these years. A distant noise of voices made everyone fall silent. August's men seemed to be approaching the beach. They don't know the caves like I do, Mrs. Zora assured. But we can't stay here forever. We need a plan. Faye sat on a rock, opening her backpack. Among her tools, there was a small object that shone in the light of the lantern, the sapphire ring. She rotated it between her fingers, observing the Montgomery crest. "All these stories I dreamed," she murmured. "The woman singing, the big house near the sea, the fear. They weren't dreams. They were memories, weren't they? From when I was a baby." Richard nodded, sitting beside her. "Maria always said that some memories are so deep that even time can't erase them. Like the talent you have for mechanics, it's the same gift she had. It's in your blood." Faye was silent for a moment, processing everything. Then, to everyone's surprise, she opened a determined smile. "If it's in my blood, then it's also in my heart. And if my mother was brave enough to protect me, I need to be brave now." She stood up, taking her tools. "I have an idea, but I'll need all of your help." The adults observed with admiration as Faye began to draw in the damp sand of the cave, explaining her plan. It was a complex project, worthy of Maria Montgomery's daughter, using not only mechanical ingenuity, but also the deep knowledge she had of the town and its inhabitants. "Your mother would be proud," Rose whispered, watching her daughter work. "She'll know," Faye responded, with conviction. "Because we're going to find her. But first, we need to show Grandpa August that the true treasure of the Montgomery family was never in the jewels." Outside, the storm was beginning to subside, as if nature itself recognized that a new force was about to change the course of this story. A force that didn't come from power or money, but from the heart of a small mechanic who was finally beginning to understand who she really was. Faye's plan was as brilliant as it was risky. As the night progressed in the cave, she explained every detail with the precision of an experienced engineer, using her tools to create small demonstrative models in the sand. "The whole town knows about the tunnels that connect the laundry to the sea," she explained, drawing an improvised map. "But only us kids know about the secret passages that connect all the main points of Northern Shores. They're old water pipes that my friends and I transformed into escape routes for our adventures." Richard watched in amazement as his niece manipulated parts and gears while talking, exactly as Maria did during her presentations to the company's board. It was like seeing his sister again, but in a miniature version, full of hope and determination. "The poor tunnel system runs underneath the central square," Faye continued, "and I installed a special mechanism at each access point. Look at this." She took a small remote control from her backpack, a creation of her own made with parts from old toys and discarded electronic components. "With this, I can control all the entrances remotely, but we need the help of the entire town." "The entire town?" Rose asked, worried. "Faye, the fewer people who know." "No, Mom," Faye gently interrupted. "You always taught me that Northern Shores is a family, and families protect each other." As if to confirm her words, familiar voices began to echo at the entrance of the cave. It was the fishermen, led by Mr. Jack, and the ladies from the sewing group with Mrs. Zelda at the front. Mrs. Zora had silently summoned all the trusted residents. "Nobody messes with our little Faye," Mr. Jack declared, his hoarse voice filled with determination. "We already lost Maria once. We won't let them take you too." Faye smiled, moved, and continued explaining her plan. Each resident would have a specific role, using their intimate knowledge of the town to create a complex network of protection and disinformation. The ladies from the sewing group would be the lookouts, strategically positioned at key points in the town, communicating through seemingly innocent signals, hanging clothes on the line, sweeping the sidewalk, watering plants. The fishermen would use their boats to create a safety curtain by sea in case a quick escape was necessary. But the most important element, Faye explained, her eyes shining with the same intensity as the lightning that still cut through the sky outside, is this. She removed a small device from her backpack, no larger than a matchbox. I built it using the project from my mother's notebook. It's a decoder capable of revealing the secret markings on Montgomery jewels. Richard took the device, immediately recognizing the design. The system Maria created, you managed to reproduce it? And improved it, Faye replied with a shy smile. Now it can also photograph and transmit the information directly to a computer. If we can get access to the jewels that Grandpa August's men have, we can prove everything, Gregory completed, a smile of admiration on his tired face. Exactly. As your mother planned to do. The group spent the following hours refining every detail of the plan. The ladies began to position themselves throughout the town, apparently performing their daily tasks. The fishermen prepared their boats, ready for any eventuality. And Faye, with Richard's help, prepared the trap that could finally bring justice to her family. There's one more thing, she said when it was almost dawn. She took a final object from her backpack, a small paper lantern, similar to those from the festival, but with a special mechanism inside. This is for her, for my mother, because now I know she's going to come back. Rose hugged her adoptive daughter tightly, silent tears running down her face. Your mother never stopped loving you, my flower. She's going to be so proud to see the amazing woman you're becoming. The day was beginning to dawn in Northern Shores, and with it, a new hope. The first rays of sun penetrated through the cracks of the cave, illuminating the group that, united by the love and courage of a small mechanic, was preparing to face one of the most powerful men in the country. Faye stored her tools and adjusted the sapphire ring on her finger. It was no longer just a family jewel, it was a symbol of her heritage, a promise of justice, and above all, a bridge between her past and her future. It's time, she declared, her voice firm despite her young age. Let's show Grandpa August that the true shine of the Montgomerys was never in the jewels, but in the hearts of the people he tried to separate. The sun was already high when August Montgomery finally arrived in Northern Shores. His car, a black imported limousine, completely clashed with the local simplicity. The 70-year-old businessman got out of the vehicle with the cultivated elegance of decades in power, his Italian suit impeccable even after the long journey. The first thing he noticed was the silence. For a coastal town at that time of morning, the streets were strangely deserted. Only a few ladies swept their sidewalks or hung clothes on the line, so focused on their tasks that they barely seemed to notice the presence of the newcomers. "Where is everyone?" he asked one of his men. "Sir, it seems there's an old local tradition. After big storms, the residents gather at the church to give thanks for protection." August smiled with disdain. Small-town superstitions did not interest him. He was there for a single reason: to recover something that belonged to the Montgomery family, something that his rebellious daughter had tried to use against him 25 years ago. "The girls' workshop is at the end of this street," another of his men informed, "but it's been empty since last night." "You're all incompetent," August exploded, his mask of civility beginning to crack. "How did you let a child escape?" That's when he noticed something strange. The ladies who were performing their domestic tasks seemed to be moving in a specific pattern. One hung a blue towel, another collected a red one. One watered her plants for exactly 10 seconds, another swept in precisely timed movements. "They're watching us," he realized. "The entire town is watching us." As if to confirm his suspicion, a group of fishermen passed by humming an old sailor's song, the same one he had heard his daughter Maria sing so many times in her jewelry workshop. "They're provoking us," he growled to his men. "Search every house, every establishment. Find my granddaughter." But Northern Shores was prepared. Each time August's men entered a place, they found only enigmatic smiles and evasive answers. It was as if the entire town was participating in a coordinated dance, always one step ahead of the invaders. In the laundry, Rose worked normally, ironing clothes with the same dedication as always. When August entered the establishment, she didn't even raise her eyes. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Who?" Rose asked innocently, spraying water on a shirt. "My granddaughter, Maria's daughter." "Oh, you must be talking about little Faye," Rose replied, still focused on her work. You know how children are, it's always around, playing, inventing things. August approached, trying to intimidate her with his presence. Don't play with me, ma'am. That girl has something that belongs to me. Something that can destroy everything I've built. It was then that a peculiar sound began to echo through the town. It was like a mechanical buzz, coming from several different points at the same time. The ladies on the sidewalks stopped their chores, smiling as if waiting for something. "What is that?" August asked, feeling for the first time a pang of concern. "The sound of time turning back," Rose answered simply, finally looking into the businessman's eyes. "Or maybe it's the sound of truth emerging." The buzz increased, and suddenly small, lights began to blink throughout the town. They were the devices that Faye had installed over the years, originally created to help fishermen orient themselves on stormy nights, now serving a very different purpose. "Grandpa August." A child's voice echoed through an improvised speaker system. "I have something to show you." The businessman spun in all directions, trying to locate the source of the voice, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once, reflecting off the walls of houses, echoing through the alleys. "Your daughter Maria was a genius," Faye's voice continued. "And she left more than just a ring when she left. She left the key to expose everything you tried to hide." On the walls of buildings, images began to be projected, enlarged photographs of Montgomery jewels, each revealing the secret markings that Maria had discovered. Codes, dates, numbers that told a very different story from the legitimate empire that August claimed to command. "Impossible," he murmured, his face losing all color. "That system was destroyed." "Nothing is impossible for a Montgomery," Faye responded, her voice now coming from a specific point, the top of the church tower. There she was, small but imposing, holding her homemade device that decoded the markings on the jewels. "The question is, are you ready to tell the truth? Or would you prefer that I continue showing the entire town, and soon the entire country, what really happens in the basements of Montgomery jewelers?" August Montgomery, for the first time in his life, found himself speechless. His 10-year-old granddaughter, using nothing but junk and genius, had managed to do what no one had ever done before, corner him with his own lies. And most impressive, she smiled, exactly as Maria used to smile when she solved a particularly complex problem. It was the Montgomery smile, not the fake smile from photos in business magazines, but the true smile of creators, of inventors, of those who used their talent to do good. The entire town seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move, in that clash between the power of money and the strength of truth. And in the midst of it all, a small mechanic held in her hands not just a device, but the fate of her entire family. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of solitary applause. Richard emerged from the crowd, clapping slowly as he approached his father. "Brilliant, isn't it, Dad?" he commented, his tone carrying a mixture of sadness and admiration. "Faye has the same gift as Maria, the same ability to see beyond appearances, to transform junk into gold. Only unlike you, she uses this gift for good." August turned to his son, his expression a mask of contained fury. "You don't understand, Richard. Everything I did, every decision I made was to maintain our family's empire." "No, Dad," Richard firmly replied. "You destroyed our family. You drove away Maria, your own daughter, just because she discovered the truth. And now you want to do the same with Faye?" At the top of the tower, Faye began to carefully descend, using a pulley system she had installed herself. Each of her movements was watched by the attentive eyes of the entire town. When her feet touched the ground, Rose ran to hug her. "Grandpa," Faye called, her voice now softer, almost gentle. "I don't want to destroy our family. I want to rebuild it. And I brought someone who can help us with that." As if having rehearsed her entrance, a figure emerged from the church. An elegant woman about 45 years old with the same expressive eyes as Faye and the same determined smile. Maria Montgomery was back in Northern Shores. "Dad," she said simply, her voice choked, with emotion. August staggered as if he had taken a physical blow. "Maria, but how?" "Faye found me," Maria explained, slowly approaching. Or rather, her inventions found me. Each device she created emitted a special signal, a frequency that only another Montgomery inventor could recognize. When I saw the videos of her creations on the internet, I immediately knew it was my daughter. The crowd watched in silence as Maria approached her father. Years of separation, hurt, and secrets seemed to weigh in the air between them. "You have a choice now, Dad," Maria continued. "You can continue denying your mistakes, and in that case, Faye and I have enough evidence to expose everything. Or you can do the right thing for the first time in a long time." Faye gently disentangled herself from Rose's arms and walked to her grandfather. Her eyes, so similar to Maria's, gazed at August with a mixture of challenge and hope. "You know, Grandpa," she said, taking his wrinkled hand between her small mechanic's hands, "machines taught me something important. Sometimes, to fix something broken, we first need to admit that it's broken." August looked at their joined hands, his granddaughter's hands calloused by work, and his own hands which had long forgotten the pleasure of creating something truly valuable. I'm sorry," he finally said, his voice almost a whisper. "Maria, Faye, I'm so sorry." The words seemed inadequate after so many years of hurt, but they were a beginning. Maria approached, enveloping father and daughter in a long-delayed embrace. Richard joined them, and for a moment 3 generations of Montgomerys were united not by power or money, but by love and forgiveness. Rose observed the scene with tears in her eyes, feeling a mixture of joy and sadness. Faye would always be her little flower, the child she raised and loved as her own daughter, but now she had a larger family, a more complete story. Faye turned to Rose, extending her hand. "Come, Mom," she called. "You're also part of this family. You always will be." The entire town seemed to breathe relieved. The ladies on the sidewalks finally abandoned their surveillance posts. The fishermen began to sing their old celebration songs, and even August's men seemed not to know what to do with that moment of vulnerability from their boss. Mrs. Zora, who observed everything from the door of the church, smiled, satisfied. "The sea returns what was entrusted to it," she murmured her ancient wisdom. "But sometimes it returns something even more precious." And so, under the bright sun of northern shores, a new story began to be written. A story not of jewels or power, but of redemption, love, and the special kind of magic that can only be found in the hands of a small mechanic who never stopped believing in the power of fixing broken things, be they machines or hearts. 6 months passed since the day of the Montgomery reconciliation in northern shores. The small coastal town had changed, but in a way that its inhabitants approved of. Rose's old laundry was now a technical training center where young people from the region learned mechanics and electronics under the guidance of Faye and Maria. The shed next to the workshop had been transformed into a social innovation laboratory, funded by the newly created Little Flower Foundation. There, ideas born from simplicity and necessity were transformed into practical solutions for needy communities throughout the country. On a sunny Saturday morning, Faye was in her original workshop, now equipped with modern tools that shared space with her old junk creations. She kept her worn overalls, even though she had new ones, claiming that each grease stain told an important story. "Faye?" Maria called from the door. "It's time, everyone is already waiting at the beach." The girl smiled, carefully storing her tools. It was a special day in Northern Shores, the first Lantern Festival since the reunion of the Montgomery family. But this time there was a new tradition to be inaugurated. At the beach, a crowd gathered around a peculiar structure, a kind of floating stage anchored near the coast, all built with recycled materials and powered by a solar panel system developed by Faye. "Are you sure it's going to work?" Richard asked, watching the gentle waves hit the structure. "Uncle Richard," Faye replied with a mischievous smile, "when has any of my inventions not worked?" The sun was beginning to set when August Montgomery went up on the stage. The former businessman looked different. His clothes were simpler, his face more serene. The last few months had been of profound transformation for him. "Friends of Northern Shores," he began, his voice carrying a humility that didn't exist before. "6 months ago, I came to this town thinking I needed to protect an empire. but I discovered that the true treasure of the Montgomery family was never in the vaults of our jewelry stores. He made a gesture towards Faye, who climbed onto the stage carrying a special lantern, larger and more elaborate than the traditional ones. The true treasure was here, in the hands of a small mechanic who taught us the value of fixing not just machines, but also hearts. Maria and Rose joined them on the stage. The two women who had raised Faye, each in her own way, now shared not only love for the girl, but a deep friendship born of mutual respect. Today, Faye took the floor, her clear voice echoing across the beach. We inaugurate the first social technology center of Northern Shores, a place where other children will be able to learn that we don't need much to create something special. We just need imagination, determination, and a heart willing to help. The special lantern was lit, revealing an internal mechanism that projected images onto the clouds, photographs of Northern Shores history, smiling faces of its inhabitants, precious moments from the last 6 months. It was as if the sky had been transformed into a giant screen, telling the story of a community that united to protect one of its children. Mrs. Zora, who observed everything with her wise smile, began to sing an old sailor's song. Soon the entire town was joining in, their voices mixing with the sound of the waves in perfect harmony. Rose hugged Faye from behind, whispering in her ear, "You see, my flower. Some families are formed by blood, others by heart. You have the luck to have both." Maria joined the embrace, and for a moment Faye felt completely at peace. She had two wonderful mothers, an uncle who adored her, a grandfather in the process of redemption, and an entire town that considered her their small prodigy mechanic. As night fell, hundreds of lanterns began to float over the calm sea of Northern Shores. Each one carried a wish, a story, a hope. But Faye's special lantern shone brighter, not just because of the technology it carried, but because of the love it represented. "What did you wish for?" Richard asked his niece, watching her special lantern hover over the waters. Faye smiled, that characteristic Montgomery smile that now had a completely new meaning. "I wished that other children could discover, as I discovered, that true talent isn't in the tools we use, but in the love we put into everything we do." And so, under a starry sky illuminated by hundreds of lanterns, Northern Shores celebrated not just the union of a family, but the birth of a new chapter in its history. A chapter written with engine grease, unconditional love, and the wisdom that the greatest treasures aren't always those that shine the brightest. A year passed since that memorable Lantern Festival. The Social Technology Center of Northern Shores had become a model of success, attracting visitors from all over the country. Faye, now 11 years old, divided her time between the classes she taught to other children and her own innovative projects. On a particularly busy afternoon, she was supervising a group of students who were building an automatic irrigation system for the community garden, the same project she was developing when her life completely changed. "Faye," one of the boys called, excited, "look who's here." At the door of the center, Maria and August proudly observed their daughter in action. They weren't alone. Behind them, a news crew was preparing to record a special report about the transformation of Montgomery Jewelers. "Come in," Faye invited, cleaning her hands on the worn overalls she refused to retire. "We're almost finishing. Here." The reporter, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, was impressed with the girl's resourcefulness. "Faye, you've become a symbol of hope for many children. How do you feel about that?" She thought for a moment, playing with the sapphire ring on her finger, a gesture she now made consciously proud of her heritage. "You know, I always thought my talent was fixing broken things, but I discovered that the real talent is helping other people discover their own gifts." The camera panned around the center, showing dozens of children working on different projects. On one wall, a large photograph showed the moment of the Montgomery family's reconciliation a year ago. Next to it was a mural with newspaper clippings telling how the jewelry empire had been transformed into a network of social innovation centers. "And what about Montgomery Jewelers?" the reporter asked August. "Don't you regret the radical change?" The family patriarch smiled, a genuine smile that had replaced his former mask of seriousness. "The most precious jewels aren't those we keep in vaults. but those that shine in a child's eyes when they discover they can change the world. Maria, who now ran the Little Flower Foundation alongside Richard, added, "Our family discovered that true luxury is being able to help others. Each center like this that we open is a jewel much more valuable than any diamond." Rose, who had just arrived from the laundry-turned-technical school, joined the group. She and Maria had developed an extraordinary partnership in managing the social projects, proving that the love for Faye was big enough to be shared. "And what about the future?" the reporter asked Faye. "What are your plans?" The girl looked at her two mothers, her grandfather, and then at the children who anxiously awaited her response. "My plan is to continue fixing things," she said simply. "But now I know that sometimes what needs to be fixed isn't the machines, but the opportunities that are missing for so many people." At that moment, as if fate wanted to underline her words, the irrigation system began to work, watering the garden with the rainwater collected. The children celebrated, and Faye smiled that characteristic Montgomery smile, the smile of creators, of dreamers, of those who use their talent to do good. The sun was beginning to set in northern shores, painting the sky with the same vibrant colors as that fateful afternoon when a broken motorcycle brought Richard to town. On the beach, fishermen returned with their nets, singing old songs that now had a new verse. A verse about a small mechanic who taught everyone that the greatest treasures are those we share. Faye picked up her tools and began to put them away, each one in its specific place, exactly as Maria had taught her. The sapphire ring on her finger shone with the late afternoon light, no longer as a symbol of secrets, but as a reminder that love, like the best inventions, can transform lives. "You know something?" she said to no one in particular, but everyone in the room stopped to listen. "There's a phrase that Mrs. Zora always repeats: the sea returns what was entrusted to it. But I think she forgot to say that. Sometimes it returns something much better. It returns the chance to start again, to do things differently, to build something more beautiful." And so, as the day came to an end in northern shores, the story of little Faye continued to inspire people throughout the country. A story that reminds us that true miracles don't happen by magic, but through the dedicated hands of those who never stop believing in the power of fixing what's broken and transforming junk into gold.